Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little interesting topic overall. And of course, the topic that I'm going to be talking about today was the possibility of there being a Jaime Mungia. At least I believe overall that is how you pronounce the young man's name. And of course, him possibly facing the recent WBC middleweight champion, I believe, Mr. Jermall Charlo. Now, of course, for those of you overall that did not know, the Jermall Charlo versus Jaime Mungia fight, I believe, has been in somewhat of negotiations and talks, I believe, for within the past, maybe possibly a couple weeks, or maybe even within the past week. I'm not really sure how long it's been going on, but I've heard all in all that there's been a certain amount of negotiations. Well, apparently those negotiations have now recently dropped. Apparently now they have recently been cut, because apparently the reason why is because there was a debate about overall where the fight should be. And apparently Jermall Charlo, who of course is with Al Heyman in that of the PBC, apparently all in all they wanted the fight, of course, in that of the US. And Jaime Mungia, who I believe is with Golden Boy Promotions, Oscar De La Hoya, of course. And then, of course, their main partner is right now with DAZN. Of course, I'm guessing they probably wanted the fight to be in that of the UK or in Great Britain. Well, in this interesting topic when it comes out, I'm going to talk about both gentlemen in this video, what I think overall transpired more than likely with these two fighters, how good of a fight I think or bad of a fight this would have been, and all in all I'm going to compare it to some other things as well. And to be quite honest with you, when it comes to both of these fighters, when it comes to both Jermall Charlo and Jaime Mungia, when you really take a look at both of their careers, even though they're both decently talented fighters, you really take a look at both of their resumes, and you really overall take a look overall at kind of the opponents that they defeated, and it really overall leaves a lot to be desired. And I know a lot of people, they may disagree with me. Of course, I've made certain videos about Mr. Jermall Charlo in the past, and I've had a certain amount of people disagree with me. If we're going to be real about Mr. Jermall Charlo, the best fighter, in my view, that he pretty much has ever beaten has been Julian J. Rock Williams. That is the only, in my view, debatable A-grade fighter that he has ever even fought, let alone beat. So it is what it is. So when it comes down to it all in all, I don't think that Jermall Charlo has the most of impressive resumes. But what I will say about Jermall Charlo is this: at least he even has a debatable possible A-class fighter on his resume. And when I take a look at Jaime Mungia, it's almost getting to the point to where it's almost Deontay Wilder-esque. And I know a certain amount of people, they may disagree with me here. They may not like overall what I'm saying. And that's not me trying to throw shots at Deontay Wilder. But Deontay Wilder, in my view, with the opponents overall that were selected for him, in my view, when it comes down to whether you agree with this or not, I believe that he was a matched or a carefully matched fighter all in all until probably about the time he got to about the Bermain Stavern, Luis Ortiz, and Tyson Fury stage. It's very, very similar in my view, except the only difference is that Jaime Mungia does not have one of the official titles at the middleweight division, and he doesn't have the 10 title defenses like Deontay Wilder did. The bottom line is this: when I took a look at Deontay Wilder at the heavyweight division, you know, a lot of people, of course, especially from the US, and I get it because it was very, very exciting because Deontay Wilder was the first American heavyweight champion within a certain amount of years, maybe even 10 plus years. But at the time when it came down to it, I was never someone all in all that was overtly impressed with Deontay Wilder, at least until a little bit later on, because Deontay Wilder, even though I thought that he was a tremendous athlete and not the worst fighter that I had ever seen, not only did I think that his skill set left, you know, certain things to be desired, but on top of that, when I just took a look at his title defenses, who really overall did he beat besides out of Luis Ortiz and Bermain Stavern? Is anyone really going to remember Artur Spilska? Is anyone really going to remember Johan Duapis? Is anyone really going to remember overall Eric Molina overall, I believe, was another one of his opponents as well? The thing overall with Deontay Wilder is the same thing, maybe what I would say about that of Jaime Mungia. When I take a look at Jaime Mungia, even though I think he's a very decent athlete, and even though I think he's a decently talented fighter, you're getting to that point now to where you're almost about to be 40-0. You're about to have 40 fights on your resume. I believe that right now you're about 39-0. I believe all in all that that's exactly what his record is. And if we were to take a look at his resume, if we're just going to be blunt and blatant and overall just to talk about the truth here, who does Jaime Mungia really have on his resume? I mean, when we really take a look at his resume, is there even one debatable A-grade fighter on there? I mean, at one point in time, of course, when he ended up getting, I believe, overall the light middleweight title, he ended up defeating Saddam Ali, who ended up defeating, I believe, at the moment, you know, the 35-year-old Miguel Cotto, who ended up tearing a right bicep, I believe, in that fight. But is Saddam Ali really looked at as someone that is really an A-grade fighter? I mean, who else has he really fought? Dennis Hogan, you know, Gabriel Rosado, I believe, in his last fight. Jaime Mungia, when it comes down to it, it's no offense to the kid. It's no offense overall to certain people overall that may think that he's a very decent fighter. But I think that Jaime Mungia, and I think more than likely that Golden Boy knows when it comes down to it, that when Jaime Mungia finally steps into the ring with someone overall that actually has decent boxing ability, and even though I don't think that Jermall Charlo, I don't necessarily think that he's someone that is on the Canelo Alvarez level, for example. When it comes down to it, Jermall Charlo, in my view, would be a little bit too good and a little bit too skilled for someone like a Jaime Mungia. Now, maybe it's just because I haven't really watched that much of him as of lately, but every single time that I've watched Jaime Mungia, I've never really been thoroughly impressed. I thought all in all that his defense was always very, very slippery. I thought that his defense overall always had a bunch of holes in it. I thought that he was always very decently hittable. I thought that he always relied a little bit too much on his punching power and not enough overall on his boxing craft, because to be quite honest with you, I don't think that Jaime Mungia really has a great boxing ability. What I'll just say overall is this, pretty much to just end this conversation. With a certain amount of these channels, you have to be very, very careful with them. Because if you watch a certain channel like a Dante's Boxing Nation or a Southpaw 773, for example, as some people would mention him, a Boxing Ego, or one of these other channels out there, they may tell you overall this narrative, or they may spoon feed you this narrative that, oh, Canelo, for example, that he's just this Mexican hype job and he avoids everybody out there. And even though I'm not saying that maybe Canelo Alvarez cannot take better fights here and there, Canelo Alvarez, if you just take a look at him within his past several fights, if Jaime Mungia or Jermall Charlo were to take a Callum Smith when he was an undefeated fighter, or a Caleb Plant or a Billy Joe Saunders when they were undefeated fighters, it would be looked at as hands down the biggest fight of their career. And that's how you know that Canelo Alvarez is looked upon on a different level. Because Canelo Alvarez, basically whatever he does, these guys are basically never going to be satisfied. But for those of us that really know what we're talking about, we know that Canelo Alvarez is on the next level and that his resume is usually up to par. Now, there are a couple of fights that Canelo has not taken yet that I would love to see, like the Jermall Charlo or Demetrius Boo Andrade or David Benavidez fights. Yeah, I would personally like to see those fights. But when it comes down to it, all in all, I can't really, go down Canelo Alvarez's, or I can't really be on his ass that much, because like I said, for every, maybe just okay guy that Canelo Alvarez takes, he may take on two very, very decent opponents. And his next opponent is going to be that of the WBA light heavyweight champion Dimitri Bivol, one of the, in my opinion, top 20 pound-for-pound fighters in the world. And to be quite honest with you, with Jaime Mungia, even though I really haven't seen his most recent fights, so maybe I would have to watch them. But every single time that I've seen this kid, to be quite honest with you, I don't even think personally that he's an A- fighter. I think that if Jaime Mungia were to face overall against Canelo Alvarez, to be honest with you, I don't even think that he would last 6 or 7 rounds. I don't think that Jaime Mungia is as skilled as some of the other Mexican or Mexican-American fighters that I've seen overall in the world of boxing. I don't think all in all that he's going to be a multiple weight division champion, as long as there's decent A-grade competition there that may be able to stop him. He may be able to become a multiple weight division champion if he can get a hold of one of these guys that maybe have already been knocked out before. Maybe if he can get a hold of, Caleb Plant or Billy Joe Saunders, since they've already been knocked out. And even then, I'm not sure if he would even beat them, because Jaime Mungia, in my opinion, he just has way too many flaws in his style. But when it comes down to it, in my view, if Jaime Mungia were to actually face Jermall Charlo, it would be, in my opinion, a 60-40 or 70-30 fight, because I don't think Jermall Charlo was necessarily Floyd Mayweather Jr. or Canelo Alvarez per se. But when it comes down to it, I do believe all in all that Jermall Charlo more than likely, in my view, would be the more skilled and the more talented fighter. I think all in all that Jermall Charlo, that he would have enough power, enough size, and I think all in all that he's a little bit more multidimensional, if not a decent amount more multidimensional, than what a Jaime Mungia would be. I can tell that Jaime Mungia, at least with some of the highlights that I've seen, that maybe he's learning a little bit, but I don't think all in all that's anywhere near enough, in my view, to beat any of the elite A-grade fighters within the 160 or 168 pound divisions. Let me just put it to you this way. If I thought that Jaime Mungia was going up against an undefeated Callum Smith, or a Caleb Plant, or a Billy Joe Saunders, or a Demetrius Boo Andrade, or a Jermall Charlo, or a David Benavidez, or Canelo at the current moment in time, any one of those fighters, even a Gennady Golovkin at this point in time in his career when he's 40, 41 years old, I'm not sure if Jaime Mungia would beat any of those fighters. It just is what it is. That's why, in my opinion, Jaime Mungia, I don't think all in all that, we'll see all in all where he goes next. Hopefully we get to see the kid eventually in a very, very big fight. But it's almost pretty much getting tiring at this point in time, kind of like it is with Jermall Charlo. It's kind of like overall, Jermall Charlo and certain fighters, they always allege that they can't get certain fights and that they always want to prove themselves. But then basically when the time comes, when it comes down to it, they don't end up taking certain fights that they should. And Jermall Charlo, I've been on his ass in the past before, because when it comes down to it, he has not accepted certain challenges that I believe also that he should have taken as well. But Jaime Mungia, when it comes down to it, he certainly has not taken any new bright challenges either. That's why, when it comes down to, like I said, when it comes to certain channels or when it comes to certain people spreading information, you have to be very, very careful. And you really overall have to do your research digging and overall someone know what you're talking about when it comes to boxing. Because like I said, a lot of people overall, because they usually love to live overall vicariously, somewhat through a racial point of view, through a lot of these fighters, because boxing is a very, very big racially motivated sport. That's why they usually like to tear down certain fighters, maybe, depending on the channel, depending on what, demographic or ethnicity they may be. For example, if you're Dante's Boxing Nation, there's a big reason why he likes to tear down someone like a Canelo Alvarez or a Vasily Lomachenko or a Tyson Fury, but he won't tear down someone like a Terrence Bud Crawford or Earl Spence Jr. when it comes down to it. It's all about how big of a threat you are to the number one pound for pound, position. So it is what it is. Boxing is a very big racially motivated sport, but no matter overall what you're digging into, whether it be sports or whether it be something else, it's always very important overall to get information from someone that is decently logical and objective. And that's what I always try to be overall on this channel. And like I said, there's no offense to Jaime Mungia, but when you're overall 39-0, and I pretty much almost don't recognize any of the fighters on your resume, basically what that tells me all in all is that you're not really trying to get a lot of the big fights out there. And overall, if you really overall try to get the fight on the zone, basically what that means is that Oscar De La Hoya or Jaime Mungia, that they were not very serious about getting this fight. Because I said this with Terrence Bud Crawford a very long time ago. Many people, of course, who tried to debate Terrence Bud Crawford as the number one pound-for-pound fighter a very long time ago, they basically tried to say, oh, well, why is Errol Spence talking about a split and all this other stuff? Well, if you truly believe that you're going to beat Errol Spence Jr. anyway, the split, especially if it's 60-40, really shouldn't be that big of a deal because you're clearly not the A side. And Jaime Mungia, even though he is a young star somewhat in the making, you are not the A side against Jermall Charlo. So it just is what it is. So at the end of the day, basically what this proves to me more than likely is that Jaime Mungia more than likely was probably not very, very serious about this fight. It just is what it is. But we'll see overall what ends up happening. Hopefully on the gnaw, maybe this fight can get somewhat rekindled. Maybe it can get made once again. I doubt more than likely that it will. More than likely, we're going to see Jaime Mungia and Jermall Charlo in fights next overall. We basically have no idea who the hell their opponents are, like usual. But we'll see on the know what happens. Anyways, that's pretty much all the information that I have to give overall in this video. But we'll see on the know what happens. Anyways, that's really about it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.